Aloha, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us today on Spotlight Hawaii and starting your week off with us. I'm Yenji Denise, joined by Ryan Kalesuji here on the platforms of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser. And Ryan, this feels like such a monumental day for our country. Just this morning, watching that nurse in New York get the first vaccine just feels very pivotal. That against, of course, the backdrop of 300,000 Americans dying from this disease. And hopefully now we're turning a corner in the pandemic.
Yeah, a historic day indeed for many people who have been looking for this day. And really, as you said, a sign of hope during a time where there has been much uncertainty and definitely a lot of people we know that are struggling. We're going to bring the conversation back home locally to some of the impacts, of course, that this pandemic continues to have in our communities and some of the tough decisions that the legislature will have to be making. Joining us today is Senate President Ron Kouchi. Of course, good morning, Senator Kouchi. Great to see you. Represents the island of Kauai, but of course is also the Senate President. First off, we want to just sort of talk to you about the upcoming legislative session. We know that there are some difficult decisions that have to be made. What are some of the things that you are doing to prepare as the legislature heads into session next month?
Well, normally we'd be so focused on policy issues, what kind of bills we'd be introducing. Normally, everybody's back in their districts meeting with constituents. People are coming to the Capitol, scheduling their appointments. But so much of our time and energy right now is simply allocated to what would be the process of day-to-day operations. And it's really key because the state capitol is located on Oahu. What tier the city and county of Honolulu would be in as to what would be the appropriate operational standards for the building. So we're prepared for people to resume entering the building. We've taken out half of the chairs from the conference rooms. We've got television monitors and stands so that we can have people on the open air lanai watching the meetings. If they're there at the Capitol and not in the room, we'd have a protocol of 5 to 10 testifiers at a time brought in and let the next group be queued up, ready to go. We've got plexiglass sneeze guards in front of the first point of contact in every office. We've got hand sanitizer stands that you motion activate, so not everybody's using the same squeeze bottle. And all of that is for us being open. We are prepared. We've increased bandwidth. So if it is still closed and people can't get into the Capitol, that we can take testimony remotely. I know in the two sessions that we had after we closed down on March 19th, it was written testimony only. But our last two judicial confirmations, we were able to take remote testimony. And so we're going to be able to do that if we are closed. So we're preparing for the worst, hoping for the best. But it seems that the infection rates that are still coming in on Oahu, that the building would likely be closed. As far as the budget, Senators Dela Cruz, the Ways and Means Chair, and Finance Chair Luke continue to meet. Speaker and I have been in conversations with them, as well as the governor, the chief of staff, and Craig Hirai, the head of BNF, as to what could be done. And by the recent comments from Chair Luke and Chair Dela Cruz, they continue to look at, are there tax exemptions, maybe that we would rescind, that would generate additional revenue to make up some of the shortfall? Is there re-imaging of certain operations in government that could relate in savings? Are there going to be some positions that would be vacated because people are going to retire that we would choose to keep vacant and get the salary savings from the vacant positions? Are there some taxes that we might increase? I know there was talk about maybe 250,000 or more earners, something like that. But there are really few people that, you would want to increase taxes on during this time. And so we're we're hopeful that we'll have other options that would be available to us. And, we're not sure that the furloughs would be implemented on January 1. I think it'll be tied up in litigation. And so we're preparing to try to find solutions that wouldn't involve the furloughs because of the possibility, that we wouldn't prevail in a court case. And the last thing, besides the excitement of the vaccination today, which hopefully would bode well for our economy, because it would help facilitate resumption of more robust tourism, is also, the talk that they still may get to another stimulus bill in Congress. And certainly if the state and local government aid is passed, then that may allow us to avert the furloughs and not have that impact, especially on our students and the most vulnerable in our communities.
I mean, so far, Washington has proved to be not quite a reliable partner when it does come to funding state budgets. So absent that and, legal issues aside, what's your take on the furloughs? Is that something that you agree with the governor on?
Well, we tried to avert it, back in May when he first talked about it, and we were able to find a way, to get through. I think it's really challenging with instructional days that would be missing for students. As the economy starts to come back, we need our people in the bureaucracy who are processing the paperwork. We need people at DOTAX working to process those who are filing the taxes to generate revenue. We are seeing single family homes that are selling at a pretty good clip. And so we need the Department of Consumer Affairs working hard at all of those title recordations, conveyance tax transactions, and everything else if we're going to facilitate the rebound. And then I'm incredibly worried about mental health services and all of the stress in the community that has been a result of being cooped up or locked down for 8 or 9 months, uncertainty of employment and things of that nature. And so hopefully we don't get to that point.
Another topic that has come up in the midst of this pandemic, of course, has been the mask wearing and the urging of doing that. We know that the governor has, issued that mask mandate for the entire state. But there is some question about jurisdiction in what is allowed to be in penalties and the way that is handed out, and that a lot of it has to be done through the legislature, through a legislative process in passing the law. Is that something that you folks will also be addressing in the upcoming session, is the penalties and redefining how that is so that it is more of a statewide mandate and that the penalties is more consistent rather than it being split up by county?
Well, again, there is a statewide mandate. So the real issue is, should the penalty provision be changed or not? So we'll certainly bring it up and look at it. But the governor has been pretty clear that while others have been calling for us to do that right away, he thinks that that's a more robust conversation and that the public is certainly going to want to weigh in on it. We haven't gotten a draft bill yet, and so I'm looking forward to getting that. And certainly I've been talking to Senator Rhodes, the chair of the Judiciary Committee, and so we're anticipating that, and certainly that's going to be something we'll take up.
What do you think of that proposal to make it, $100 fine? Let's say that you just get a ticket as opposed to the misdemeanor offense that it is now.
Well, let me preface my comment by saying I'm not an attorney. So it seems on its surface to be logical and something that would make sense. But as usual, once you put this out for hearing and we get the draft of the bill, we need to be sure that we're not creating a different problem, and having the hearings will allow us to get that feedback. But again, on its surface, it seems like something that would be prudent for us to do.
Of course, another topic is the Safe Travels program that the state has implemented, and we've heard some going back and forth with this. Of course, the rule changes that have happened with the governor changing the mandate of having the test results in hand before people arrive here to the state. We've heard, from different county mayors that we have spoken to that have asked for more flexibility in each county having their own say on what should happen, and them having a say for what they should want, what plans they want to implement on their own islands. What are your thoughts overall about the Safe Travel programs, its success or its failure so far, and your thoughts on the independence that some of these counties want to be able to kind of manage their own counties individually?
Well, I think one of the biggest concerns that was out there about secondary tests is how many of them would be available. Clearly, the city and county has stood up now a lab at the airport that they say can process 10,000 tests a day. And, if it's able to handle that capacity, then, maybe Mayor Caldwell has a reasonable plan. Maybe his suggestion that if you didn't get your results, but you take your test at the airport and you get a negative test that you could test out of quarantine, may have some merit if we have supply availability. But as far as the safe travel plan works, for Maui County, Hawaii County, and the city and county of Honolulu, it seems to be working as far as not having a huge spike in any positives as travel related situation. A lot of the large spikes on Oahu have come because of what has been happening in the prisons. However, Kauai has just been an anomaly or an outlier in the statistics. I think at one point they said that 55 travelers did not get their result when they boarded, and when they landed, they became positive. But 27 of the 55 at that time were from Kauai. And we're about 7% of the population. So, if we're about 10% of those, it would be in the statistical norm, but at 50%, it was an outlier. And let me be clear, more than half of the positives as a result of travel were from residents who went to the mainland and were returning. So this isn't a tourist-related phenomenon only. But with the numbers on Kauai and the bed shortage, I understand what Mayor Kawakami was saying, and it seemed like it was either you're in, but these positives in 6 weeks matched the first 7.5 months of the pandemic and challenged our bed capacity, or it's the 14-day quarantine, which has devastated our economy. I know the three representatives and myself have been communicating to the governor that, maybe you could relook at Mayor Kawakami's 3-day quarantine and test out program, and at least give some of the businesses on Kauai a fighting chance while protecting our limited bed capacity.
What have those discussions been like? What have you heard from the governor's office on that? Because Mayor Kawakami says that he hasn't been given a real reason as to why that's been denied.
Again, initially it was about capacity, but I think if Mayor Kawakami feels he can get the capacity to do the second test, then let's give him a chance to succeed. And then if it doesn't, we need to come back to the drawing board. But at this point, to make a decision based on assumptions and not actual facts is really, again, just incredibly hurtful to the businesses that all had to shut down after the 14-day quarantine went into effect. I think the Hyatt has 900 employees and 700 were laid off. They have people who still have to maintain the property and everything else. I know that Marriott had about 200 people they brought on that were going to have to be let go. Other restaurants are closing. Other visitor-related activities have all been impacted by the quarantine. But we're still getting 4 or 5, positives a day when we had gone over 40 days with no positives. I think Dr. Behrman's indicated since July, we had not had any community spread of the COVID. And, now we're getting community spread cases. And so, where's the balance in trying to protect the health and safety of the residents and trying to give the people in business a fighting chance and people a opportunity to get back to work. And the only middle path on Kauai right now seems to be that 3-day, post-arrival test out.
When we look at the state as a whole, and you in the position that you are as Senate President, having to help to shape legislation and work with your fellow senators as well, what are your thoughts about, as you head into this legislative session, looking for ways to, of course, diversify the economy, but also just to help the state rebound economically? We know the impact that this has had on the tourism industry and the amount of money that will be available for the budget. And absent furloughs, as we talked about earlier, what other ways are you folks looking at to help to produce further income or increase in other industries, so that heading into this legislative session, there can be some substantive changes that can help to provide some relief for the economy?
Well, in the Farm Bill, as well as legislation that the legislature passed and the governor signed, hemp creates a incredible opportunity where we have some production facilities here. So it's not just the agricultural growing of the hemp. They've posted the articles that show that hemp is a crop that is great for soil remediation. You have rope, you have building material, you have the oils, you have clothing. And so hemp is something I think we got great potential to put back into the ground. We're now reaching out beyond the farm to schools, farm to the state hospitals and prisons, and looking for other institutional partners and working with the agricultural community to see if we can't get some of the produce that was targeted for the visitors to be consumed by our business operations and schools here in Hawaii, to ensure that farmers continue to be strong. The broadband hui has been meeting since March 25th every Wednesday. And at this point, we've been in communication with our federal delegation, but increasing bandwidth and Wi-Fi connectivity is going to be an important part of hitting that diversification. There are a lot of people who are now working remotely. Telemedicine falls under that broadband and Wi-Fi connectivity sphere. And at this point, there's been a lot of people relocating to Hawaii to do their work remotely because they're not required to go into the office. And so, those are 2 areas or 3 areas that I think, we can see great improvement. And then the governor and his team have been doing a great job in finding the shovel-ready capital projects that, we have funded, and trying to make sure that we have a healthy construction industry, and it would continue to infuse capital into this economy.
We like to bring in the viewers, and Dot Chang has a question here. It just says lottery ? And I think that's something that comes up whenever we face a financial crisis, and even in the times that we don't. When we talk about boosting revenue, the issue of legalizing marijuana is raised, and the issue of the lottery is raised. Is the state interested in pursuing any of those paths right now?
Well, we've generally had marijuana legalization bills, so I fully expect that we would have another one. As far as the lottery, the problem that I have with any form of gambling is that, again, federally, if you allow gaming on your books, then Native American Indians are able to then run gaming operations in your state. And they are sovereign and they are unregulated. And I know Makawena Point used to have a Coast Guard station, which is near the Hyatt Regency Poipu and the Embassy Suites. So if the Native American Indians still own that property, they could then run gaming there. And if we said only lottery because we don't want casinos, the Native American Indians could then build a casino if they wanted to. And with everything that I've seen on Mauna Kea and the resurgence of the Native Hawaiian recognition and their, I guess, their grievances for how they have been left out and mistreated. I just would find it incredibly difficult in our community that we would put a lottery in place. Then Native American Indians who have used federal scrip to buy federal land and own property here in Hawaii would put up casinos, and they would start seeing great revenue from their gaming operations, and the Native Hawaiians would be left out because they're not federally recognized, and the Native Hawaiians would not have the ability to do what the Native American Indians would be. And that's the primary reason that I have not supported gaming, when I've been in the legislature. And, we can get into the debate of all the other social issues and, if is it good or is it bad, but to just see that division grow even wider in our Native Hawaiian community is not something that I would want to be responsible for.
As we head up into the legislative session, of course, the governor is expected to release his budget next week. And so you'll have more opportunity along with your team and for those who work within the Senate to examine that. And as you head into the session, as you sort of put these majority package bills together and getting ready for all of that, talk a little bit about what you're expecting in terms of the relationship that you have with the administration. We know that through this pandemic, there have been some contentious moments with the Senate Committee on COVID and the administration, and just some push back and forth between these bodies of leadership. Talk about where you folks are at right now in terms of your confidence in working together, moving forward into the legislative session during a time where we know there's a lot to get done.
Well, compared to what we see on the national level, I think everything is going great in Hawaii. The one thing that we have, whether it's the members of the House and their leadership team, the Senate and their leadership, our leadership team, and the governor, is people who are committed to do the best job for Hawaii. The beauty of the democracy is supposed to be encouraging the voice of dissent without penalty, without punishment. And so when I think the governor has done things right, I've stood up with him at the Honolulu airport when we reopened inter-island travel. And I thought that we had a good plan in place at that time, and certainly stood with him. When I've disagreed with him, I have, made it very clear about what I disagree on. But I try to be very clear on the disagreement so that we can find out how do we fix it. And I think what the COVID committee has done a great job of is they have written a memo after every single meeting, and they have made recommendations in writing. So if there is fault with some of the things that they are doing, then point them out, because we've put it down on paper. And we've taken a position that anybody can go and pick apart, or somebody can come and support. But, I fully expect us to continue to work together for the best result for the people of Hawaii. But in areas where we think there's a better way, it is our obligation to stand up and point out what we believe would be the better path. And then we'll let the people decide as to who had a good idea or not. The governor was incredibly upset at the COVID committee when they went to visit unannounced at the Department of Health. But at the end of the day, we wound up having the whole lack of contact tracers issue come to light. And we finally factually showed what was happening, and more importantly, what wasn't happening. And we now have a much better process going forward. So I think through the push and pull, we've seen good results come out. The Speakers Committee is the same thing. They have very detailed reports and recommendations. And so they put themselves out there in writing so that you can carry the conversation about, is this a better idea, or do we like the governor's idea better? And it's not people who are just throwing rocks and not offering solutions. In every case, we offer what we think would be the better solution.
Tracy has it's more of a comment, but there's a question at the end. She says, small businesses on Kauai are closing for good people, are still homeless, people running around of unemployment, businesses aren't hiring. What are the leaders doing to help people on Kauai? This, of course, is a question specific to Kauai, but I'm sure that there are people on all the islands who have similar questions. As we encourage people to stay the course, what do you say to Tracy and others who are hurting in the short term and worried that they might not be able to pay their rent and they are losing their jobs right now?
Well, at this point, the PPP from the federal level was the main source of assistance for small businesses. We've had rental assistance that hopefully would get to landlords and prevent foreclosures besides evictions. The restaurant card has come out, but it's really what the federal government does on the unemployment insurance plus ups and another round of PPP that would be the most important thing to help businesses. We're $1.4 billion in the hole. We don't have the financial resources where we could wind up infusing a large amount of capital to assist the businesses that are there. And so we really need to get that support from the federal government. And I hope that we see some positive results this week in Washington, D.C.
I want to go back just to one of the questions that we had earlier, specifically for the Department of Health and with the transition in power and new leadership that has now taken over and managing. What are your thoughts about how the Department of Health is doing? We know recently at one of the Senate COVID task force, that one of those meetings, some of the members of that panel and senators were very critical of the new director and the job that they were doing, pointing out a number of things and almost saying that at times they're failing in certain areas. Are you confident with the job that this new leadership of the Department of Health is doing based on what you've heard and what you've seen thus far?
Well, the part that I'm confident in is Dr. Char answers direct questions with direct answers. And some of the answers, were not answers that the committee wanted to hear, but the conversation was held. And now that we see where they feel it's deficient, then we can make hopefully corrections and start doing a better job in those areas. But so many other things have improved so much under her leadership that she needs to be given an opportunity to succeed. And I appreciate her transparency and I appreciate her candor.
We started off by talking about the vaccine. Just on the local level, we're interested to ask you, are you going to take the vaccine, and how do we boost public confidence in this? Because our understanding is that 70% of the state needs to get the vaccine for this to actually work.
Well, we were joking before we came on that there are some that said, let those politicians be the guinea pigs first and let's see if they're okay after they take it. And then the other half would say, how are these guys so privileged that they can cut the line and get the vaccine? So I thought Mayor Bloomberg said it well this morning when I saw him on CNN. Absolutely, I'm confident in the vaccine. Absolutely, yes, I will take the vaccine when it's available to me, but I will take the vaccine when my turn comes up based on the protocols that the governor and the Department of Health have worked out. Unfortunately, I'm 63 years old, and so I'm 2 years younger than the 65 and older group, so I won't be in the first group that would be in line. I'm not a frontline first responder. I'm not in the medical field, and fortunately, I'm not in an assisted living facility at this point. But in the second quarter, when more vaccines become available, and if it's my turn based on the plan we have to get the vaccine, then I intend to get the vaccine.
Right, Senate President Ron Kouchi, thank you so much for joining us here today. Our time is unfortunately up, but we really do appreciate you giving us a preview of course, what's to come, and no doubt what will be a very busy legislative session, and wishing you all the best this holiday season. Thanks so much for joining us.
And happy holidays to all of your viewers out there and to the two of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Aloha.
Aloha.
I think Yanji's mic is muted.
Sorry,
there you go.
That's to block out the kids in the other room. Thank you. You know, it was very interesting to hear from him on the budget to start, you know, saying that he doesn't know that the furloughs are going to hold up legal muster, and saying that there could be tax credits that are rescinded. They could perhaps look at high income earners and raising taxes on those folks, although he did say that there's a lot of reluctance around raising taxes on anyone right now. But certainly there are places where they are looking for money as opposed to laying people off, which has received so much pushback from the unions and others, you know, pointing out that there are a lot of people who want public schools to be run at full capacity as soon as possible. And if we start furloughing teachers, they could start leaving the state.
Yeah, and again, there is obviously some tough decisions that have to be made. The governor has to officially provide his outlook and his budget drop, which will happen next week, that will give the legislature a clearer understanding of sort of how the governor and his administration have come up with these numbers and how they project to balance the state budget heading into the next legislative session. And so that's going to be a very important day for legislators to have the opportunity to review that, to be able to get together and see if they can find an additional way to counter what the governor is proposing as they head into this legislative session. I thought it was interesting to note, he says that they continue to have a good working relationship. We do know, as we said earlier, that there have been some public disagreements between the members of the Senate and House and the governor's administration about what best path to take forward. And going into the legislative session, this is going to be a very critical legislative session with the amount of things that need to happen in order to help the state continue to move forward on the budget standpoint, as well as we sort of navigate through this pandemic. So I think that's going to be another interesting thing to see, is that dynamic between the administration and the legislative branch as we head into the session next month.
Yeah, and to your question to him about the Department of Public Health, or the Department of Health, and his confidence in that, you know, I had completely forgotten, because we've been talking about this for so long, that the legislators actually did go down to DOH and try to find the contact tracers, and kind of revealed publicly that the program was not as robust as was being advertised. And that was a big conflict at the time, but it did lead to some pretty drastic changes. And he did express some confidence in Libby Char, while others obviously have not. So that's interesting to note there, that he wants to give her time to do what she needs to do, and saying that she is a straight shooter and answers their questions. Also saying that he will get the vaccine as soon as it is available to him.
That's right. And you know, we're going to talk a little bit more about the vaccine rollout. Of course, the person that is in charge of that and leading that will be the lieutenant governor. And so we're going to be talking to the lieutenant governor about his plans and about the state's plans about the vaccine, and who is going to be the first to get that here locally, and when we're going to start to see that happen.
Yeah, very exciting to know that the first doses are on their way, and we could see that being administered as early as this week. So we'll be talking to Lieutenant Governor Josh Green on Wednesday, and then on Friday we have a guest that we've been trying to get back for some time. We're so excited to invite Dr. Christina Kishimoto, who is the superintendent of the Department of Education. We know a lot of parents, every time we're on here, have asked about what's happening with the schools. So we're going straight to the top to ask about what the plan is for 2021.
And then next week, we'll be talking to Ann Perez-Estaquio from, of course, the Department of Labor. She's going to be giving us an update on some of those benefits that will be expiring at the end of the year due to CARES Act funding, as well as some of the exhausted unemployment benefits. So we'll be looking forward to that conversation. And then, you know, following that, we'll also be speaking with a number of people who are experiencing how this pandemic is impacting so many throughout the world. We're going to be doing sort of a panel discussion with members of the media who are covering this from different perspectives. And we'll also, of course, be talking to the governor later this month as well. So a lot of exciting things to come. We're about midway through this month and almost through 2020. It's been a crazy year, but we certainly appreciate all of you joining us and being a part of this conversation.
Yes, thank you so much for starting your week off with us. Again, join us for a deep dive into the vaccine and the rollout. That'll be happening on Wednesday, 10:30, right here with Lieutenant Governor Josh Green. Until then, we wish you a fond aloha.
Take care. We'll see you then.